My complete name is Cosmas Elias Marandos.
When did you serve in Berlin?
I served in Berlin in July of 1967 until 70.
Were you single or married when you came to Berlin?
I was single, fortunately.
Where did you live in Berlin?
I lived at Flanaganstrasse 5.
Okay. And what made your tour in Berlin special for you? What did you like about the assignment?
Well, my assignment was great. When I first got my orders, I didn't know where I was going, and thought I was going to APO New York 09742, and I went to my top sergeant. I said, Sergeant, where the hell am I going? And he looked at me and said, you lucky son of a bitch. I said, what's that mean? He said, you're going to Berlin, Germany, spit and polish. I said, really? He said, that's where you're going. You're going to be spit and polish and meeting dignitaries, and everything is what you're going to do. I said, well, okay. And that's what happened. I get over here. I get out of Officers Candidate School in Fort Benning, Georgia. And when I graduated, I sort of volunteered for Vietnam, and then my orders came through for Berlin. I got to Berlin, and my first job, I went to see the colonel of my battalion, and he told me, I don't have a company for you right now, but we're going to have a parade in one of the districts of Berlin, and I want you to take a squad of men and pull all the demonstrators outside of the parade route about 50 meters ahead. I said, okay. And that was my first job in Berlin.
And
After a while, I sort of enjoyed Berlin, and
and I think you said what your job title was, but what company were you in? What
I was in the 4th Battalion, 18th Infantry. I was first I was a platoon leader in the Company A. Then I went into headquarters company and became the S2.
And you were and where was your were you at Andrews? Were you at McNair?
Say again?
Were you at Andrews or McNair?
Oh, I was at McNair Barracks. Yeah.
What made your tour in Berlin special for you? What did you like about the assignment?
Well, the assignment was, I liked the challenging of meeting all the different nations. I had to deal with the British, and I had to deal with the French. My French was sort of broken up. I went studied in high school and college, and they figured that I knew French backwards, and I didn't. But I did go up and deal with the French, and I enjoyed that intrigue about it. I enjoyed the intrigue about going to East Berlin on missions and stuff like that. It was like the comic book or the magazine, Mad Magazine. And in that magazine, they had a characters, the spy versus spy, the black against the white. And that's what I thought Berlin was like. And we were spying on each other. We would go to East Berlin, and I'd take notes and come back. And the Russians would come to West Berlin and do the same thing. And I told the colonel one day, I said, sir, why don't we meet at Checkpoint Charlie and just exchange notes? And he didn't think that was very funny, but I thought it was kind of humorous, to be honest with you.
So it sounds like, I mean, you were essentially infantry, right?
Infantry.
But at the same time, you were doing.
I was in the intelligence, S2 and G2 areas. So that's where I was.
Okay, so S2 then means
intelligence.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Would that in normal infantry be recon then, or like
recon? Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'm asking some questions because I'm concerned that some people in the future might not know
what recon.
Well, yeah, or what what these designations mean, or where the folks were.
True. True.
Why should someone like yourself join this organization?
Well, I have a couple of friends. When I was here, I met 4 other guys, and we were all lived in Flanaganstrasse area. And I tried to tell them to join this organization, and they're reluctant. I don't know why, but when I go back, I'm going to talk to them again. But I think the organization is just a great organization. It brings you back together. And these are the best times of our lives in some respects, because the camaraderie that we had together in close unit with each other was fantastic. I enjoyed that immensely. And where we watch each other's back, and that's what the Army is about, or the service is about. You watch each other's back, and I found that extremely great. When I was in college and high school, I was as an athlete. You know, we played a lot of sports, and I had that same camaraderie. But when you get out of that area, I'm not going to play professional. So this brought us together as other than sports. So I enjoyed it immensely.
And you said you were really happy to be here when you to come here when you were single. Like, did you
Oh,
did you have a good life as a single?
yeah. As a matter of fact, yes, I did.
Uh,
You know, when I first came here, I didn't speak German. And I said to myself, well, after about 6 months, I said, you know, if I don't learn German, I'm going to be a hermit. So I started dating some girls, and they want to learn English, and I want to learn German. And so we talked back and forth in the two languages, that she would correct me and I'd correct her. And that's how I was able to learn enough to get around Germany or wherever. So it's kind of interesting.
but where did you even go to?
Well, where we went would be the officers club,
Mhm.
and we go down to a Hanukkah house, and we meet some girls down there, some women down there, and that expanded to where we would be sitting around in our units and say, oh, let's have a party tonight. And it says, okay, you call with who you know, you call who you know, and that's how we got together and had parties. And it was just really nice. I had a great time with the people, the German girls were just fantastic. The guys were great too, but unfortunately, I knew more girls than the guys. But it was just a nice atmosphere for me, and I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot. I went to one particular girl I met. She invited me home for a Sunday dinner, and I went over to the Sunday dinner, and her father was in World War II, and I was fascinated with that. So I started talking to him more about the war, and I said to him, what did you do? And he was an infantryman, and he said, I forget what part of Germany he was in, but his unit was going to be moved out to Poland area. And he said that his best friend came to him and gave him a box of memorabilia. And he said, if I don't come back, he says, give this to my girlfriend in Berlin. He said, I'll take care of it, I'll do it. And he was going to be shipped out, but he had a wound. He told me he had a bad wound on his arm, and he didn't want to go out anymore. But he would take the wound and pull off the scab, he said, and pour salt on it, and then inflame it to look like it goes back to the medics. He said, oh, you're not ready to go back in. And this is what he told me. I said, wow. And so he finally, his friend never came back. And so he went to Berlin, met the other guy's girlfriend, and told her, gave her the box. And they became an item, and next thing you know, they got married, and they had this Christina, the girl that I had met. And that was it. It was just it was nice meeting him. And I said to him, this was toward the end of the war, I said, you know, when the war was getting kind of to the end, you had a feeling that it was coming to the end, didn't you? And now this is, of course, I'm going through the translator for his daughter. And he said, yes, we did. I said, well, why didn't you just give up? And he looked at me and he said, would you? And I reflected on that, and I said, I guess I would never do that either. You fight to the end. And that was a lesson learned from him. So very interesting.
Well, and also infantryman to infantryman. Right? I mean, you had a
Oh yeah,
there too,
yeah,
right?
yeah, possibly, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'm just curious because were you ever concerned that even through an extended network where there might be some vetting that you might be inviting, I don't know, a German woman that might be from the Stasi or from.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I would meet a girl, and we'd talk, and I get her name or where she lived, and I turn it into the headquarters to find out who she is, and have her vetted, so to speak. And that's how I was fearful of that in some respects, because I had one girl that lived in Kiel, and she'd call me all the time. And she says, "Oh, what are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I can't tell you." And she says, "Oh, come on, you can tell, you know." And she would push me on the issue, and I just wouldn't talk to her about it. And I always questioned, you know, who is she? So I sent her name and address and had her checked out, and they said, "No, she's fine." You
Do
know,
you think all the officers did that, or was
I
that-
don't think so.
No.
I don't.
You were just being extra careful.
Yeah, you know, you don't want to get kicked out of Berlin, you know, because you had a confrontation or a unit with another girl, you know. So yeah, I was being careful.
Because Berlin was considered a special assignment, right? I mean,
I believe it was. I didn't realize how special it was. You know, when you get to Berlin and you get the assignment, you go, "Oh, geez," you know. But once I got here, I realized what a opportunity is to you're 110 miles in East Germany and you're completely surrounded. And the joke was that if war broke out, POW goes up checkpoint Charlie, checkpoint Bravo, and we're here, you know. So that was it. So it was a very special assignment. But you don't realize it when you first get it. You don't realize anything. When the guy said spit and shine all the time, I'm going, "Oh, geez, you know, I got to break out in, you know, Class A's and all this." So
yeah,
that was
you thought you would be doing a lot of marching in beautiful uniforms, and
yeah.
but it turns out they sent you into East Berlin to take notes on
Yeah.
what were the kinds of things that you were recording? Troop movements, or
I don't recall. They gave me a list, and you just checked off the list. That's
did
what
those
it
lists
was.
change at all?
Apparently they did, because every time I went, there was another list. So,
Okay.
but I enjoyed that. The only other, we used to go to West Germany, to Vielflicken, and because we couldn't shoot our big weapons off here.
Yeah.
We timed up.
No, we're fine.
Oh, okay. We couldn't shoot our weapons off here, so we go to Vielflicken. And one particular time we went down there, and the colonel called me into his office, and he said, "You're gonna have to take a company of men, and you're gonna take them to Grafenwehr to do, because they can't shoot their weapons up, whatever it was. I don't know what." So I was in charge of these, you know, about 30 vehicles and about 100 men, and the Grafenwehr and the rest of the unit went back to Berlin. So we were there about a couple of weeks. And then I came back to Berlin, and I was going through checkpoint Alpha, East and West Germany. And I got across the border, and it was night, and it was raining. And the Russian officer came down and wanted to check the men out. And I gave him the papers we had. And he said, "No, we were going through an interpreter at the time." He says, "I want the men to come out so I can count each one." And I said, I don't think so. And he said, "Yeah, we're going to do it." I said, "Well, just pick up the canvas and look and count the men." I said, "It's pouring out, and I don't think it's, you know, I don't want the men to stand out there, you know, and get cold and get wet." And in the meantime, we're in the rain and it's pouring, and he insisted. And I went back and forth with him. And he says, "No, we're not going to do it." And I'd say maybe about a half hour later, a little more, he blinked. And he says, "Okay, never mind." And so we got back in our trucks and left. Now, we were at the checkpoint longer than we were supposed to be. So I know the American side was saying, "What the hell's wrong with the convoy? Why don't they keep on going?" And so I finally get back to Berlin late at night. And once we get back there, the next morning I give a report to the colonel, and I told him what had happened. When he called me out, he said, "What happened at Checkpoint Alpha? Why didn't you move the convoy?" And I explained to him what happened. And he says, "Okay, thank you." And I saluted and left, walked out. And as I was walking out of the loft, I heard him say, "Good job." And I didn't turn around, I just kept on walking. So that was one of the incidents that I had in Berlin. The only other incident I had was I went to East Berlin on off duty. And I was with two other guys, two other officers. One was a captain, just made captain, and the other one was another first lieutenant like myself at the time. And Captain Dan Dempsey said, "I've never been to East Berlin." I said, "Dan, I go there a lot, and I can show you around." He said, "Okay." So we got orders to go over, passes and go over. And so we're over in East Berlin, and we're all over the place. And took him to the Russian War Memorial. I took him to the old flea market in East Berlin. Took him everywhere. I said, you know, there's a nice museum called the Permagon Museum. We'll go down there and you'll see that. He says, okay. So we're driving along that road and the Permagon Museum's on your left, on your right. And we came to, I stopped in front of the entrance and I said, Dan, what does that sign say? Because I can't see the roof line. And he said, oh, it's no stopping. You know, blue dot with a red perimeter, no stopping. I said, okay. So we kept, I said, I drove probably about 50 feet up into the road or something. I said, Dan, there's nothing up here. We got to turn around and get out of here. He goes, oh, okay. So I turned the car around, and as I did, there's an East German soldier in the middle of the road. And short guy, uniform disarray. His rifle was okay though. And he's standing in the middle of the road. And Dan said, what are you going to do? I said, well, he'll get out of the way. I'm going to keep on going. Dan said, Q, I don't know. I said, yeah, I am. So I let the car roll. And now he's on top of my hood with the rifle at the windshield. And Dan says, well, what are you going to do? I said, Dan, I'm going to keep on going. He'll get off. He goes, oh, I don't think you better stop. You better stop. I said, I don't think we should stop. We should keep on going. He says, no, you better stop. So I stopped the car. No more than I stopped the car within 15 seconds or 20 seconds. Truck behind us, truck behind in front of us. And there we sat for hours. And I can remember this East German major came over and asked us, what are you guys doing here? And I looked over from my driver's seat and I said, we demand to see a Soviet officer, the normal routine of the thing.
We join you?
Well, we're having an interview right now.
Oh,
I mean, you're welcome to sit, but yeah, we're
yeah. We'll be quiet.
So he said, I said, we demand to see a Soviet officer. Now, Dan picks up on it. And he looked at Dan, he said, Captain, what are you doing here? And he said, we demand to see a Soviet officer. And the guy said to him, well, you know, you're in East Germany. He said, you're beyond that now. And Dan says, I said, no, we're not, we're okay. And Dan says, we demand to see a Soviet officer. So he walked away. And Dan turns to me and he says, we're in trouble, we're in East Germany. I says, no, we're not, Dan, we're okay. I said, checkpoint Charlie's there, Brenner Brigade. We're okay. And he goes, oh, I don't think so. Oh, and he's very nervous. So after several hours of this, he finally came over and they said, okay, you can leave. They pulled the trucks out, the soldiers left. And I looked at him, I said, I want to know why you detained us. You had no right to detain us. I said, we demanded a Soviet officer. You had no right to not to deny us. And I said, why did you do that? And he said, go, just go. Dan's good. Call us, let's get out of here. Let's make it. So we left and we went down the hill and there's a truck in my lane. And I waved to the truck to get out of my way. And they said, no, go around. So Dan's again, Bob in the back seat, he was great. Bob Price, he was a fantastic guy. And he didn't say anything. He was infantry, so Danny was more administrative. So we go around it, and as we go around it, there was a guy with a camera taking a picture of us and that pole that was there. And Dan said he didn't see it. I don't know if they put it up or after we had gone in there, but there was another sign, a white dot with a red perimeter, meaning do not enter. And so they got us. So as we came through, we saw an American vehicle watching us from the time that it happened, because once it happened, there was a French soldier walking by. And I said to him in my broken French, if you go to Checkpoint Charlie, tell him that we're here. And apparently he did. When we get to Checkpoint Charlie, we had to wait. Because we're wondering why they're making us wait here. So we just patiently waited. Then we saw this car come across from the west. It was a big limousine with the flags. We know it's a staff car somewhere. And it was going over to wage an official protest to the Russians that held in 3 American officers in East Berlin. I get through checkpoint Charlie. An MP came up to me and said, "Are you Lieutenant Marandos?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Follow me." We get 20 minutes later, we get to American headquarters. They separated the three of us, and they interrogated me for about an hour and a half. The next guy about half an hour. The last guy about 20. All stories were coincided. You know, there was nothing different. And I was restricted from going back to East Berlin. And then 6 months later, I put in for it again because I wanted to finish my job here. And they said, okay. So that was the experience I had there. Great experience. Fortunately, about 3 or 4 days after it happened, I said to myself, I got to write this down because I'll forget about it. And so I wrote this handwritten thing of where we went, what we saw, and what happened at the detention point. And that was it.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, are you sure that it was East German? Because the East Germans, like, they had no authority over you.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
But they said that apparently there was a garrison right there. we turned on, and I knew it was there, and we forgot. And then that's why I said, Dan, let's get out of here. There's nothing really here.
Yeah.
And then they kept coming out of the building and surrounding the whole car with, the weapons are all facing us. And Dan, that's when Dan panicked a little. But we all, we were a little nervous. I was more nervous. If they kept us for 2 years or 5 years, I knew eventually I'd get out, I was more nervous to see my own commandos because I screwed up. And that scared me the most.
But you screwed up because you drove a little too far, or?
Yeah. I should have known better. I should have known to turn around.
But even though you still were in East Berlin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew where I was.
Mm.
I wasn't scared about I was in East Germany.
Yeah.
I know that I was not there because of my travels prior. I knew where I was going. So that was about it.